Hello, everyone. Great to see you. My name's Emma McGregor. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm delighted to be with you today virtually to talk about this week's topic, which is nurses as knowledge makers. I do have a slide deck, which I will share, so I'll be kind of minimized in this top of your screen, but I just wanted to take a chance to greet you here and let's get started. Okay. Great. So, yeah, I'm delighted to be here for this opportunity. And I will say I found this content in particular for me when I took this course was a very emancipatory turn in my thinking. So I really hope that I can help that happen for you today. And I know Dr. Fredericks will have provided something like that for you as well. So I do ask for you to have like a reflective journal or some reflective writing with you as you go, just so that you're able to kind of jot down thoughts, because I do have prompts along the way. Usually it's in person or synchronous, so it's more interactive. So we'll make do with this today. All right. So to begin today, I like to ask myself, or we can ask ourselves, who generates knowledge? A popular slogan derived from Latin states, "Nothing about us without us. Nihil de nobis sine nobis." I think certainly many of us would agree with its statement and its implications for equity and inclusion, and it's clear why this slogan has been taken up over the years by various advocacy groups. As can be learned from studying research ethics, people have the right to be part of generating the knowledge that is going to be used by them. For example, nurses collect a great deal of information on patients through assessment, observation, testing, intuition, and conversation. This information belongs to the patient. It's a privilege to work with this knowledge, but it's only with the informed consent of the person in our care. So now let's apply this notion within our own discipline. Following this principle, nothing about us without us, nurses should be involved in co-creating the knowledge that we use to make decisions and the knowledge used to make decisions for us. But how do nurses make knowledge? So that's what we'll be discussing today. And here's what you can expect from our time together, our learner-centered outcomes. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to appreciate how nurses are knowledge makers as well as knowledge users, to understand how a process of inquiry into nursing praxis reveals construction of nursing knowledge, and finally, to adopt the role of clinical scholar in nursing praxis development. So, having worked with the patterns of knowing from Chinn Kramer already in this course, I would just like to take a moment to locate ourselves within this landscape of knowledge. There are 5 patterns of knowledge, starting at the top: empiric, personal, aesthetic, ethical, and emancipatory. And I'd just like to take a moment for you to pause and think about which pattern of knowledge do you tend to lean towards. There are no wrong answers. Probably to some extent, most of us could highlight all the patterns. In this exercise, we're just looking to see our preferences. You can highlight more than 1, perhaps 2 or 3 patterns of knowing that speak the strongest to you. So just take a moment with your pen and paper just to maybe write down your top 2 or your strongest pattern of knowing. As you think about this, you might consider, how might your valuation of a certain pattern of knowledge inform your actions? How would you use a different balance of knowledge patterns in different practice settings? For instance, in an ICU, which pattern of knowledge would you rely on? Versus in a hospice, what pattern of knowledge would you rely on? Public health, primary care. And why might those be different? You might also want to consider, how might this balance in patterns of knowledge serve you, and how might it also be holding you back? When we consider each of the patterns together, we recognize that we are already using all of these patterns every day, and we strive towards balance. And one way to do that is to bring awareness to our tendencies. Note how when we apply ourselves to this expanse of knowledge, we cover more knowledge together. And nursing scholar Sue Entrobus built on ideas about living in a knowledge society. She proposes that since knowledge constantly evolves, so too must nursing knowledge. We are already beyond using only medical and biomedical models as our only basis for practice. Nurses are no longer simply following orders in a cure-based illness model. Entrobus sees the future as one where knowledge is seen as temporary, dynamic, and humanistic, embedded within a health, not illness paradigm. Entrobus further hypothesized that operating within a health paradigm makes greater personal demands on individual nurses. Entrobus suggests developing our personal knowing, our knowledge of ourselves in this context, so that we are able to provide care that is deeper, more meaningful, and attuned to the whole person. And because we ourselves act as a filter through which all knowledge is encountered, Marlene Smith then challenges us to consider if all knowing is in fact personal knowing. The theoretical framework of nursing that a nurse adopts or constructs for use in practice does and should be able to serve as the basis for understanding self as a human being and as a nurse. So the use and creation of knowledge is unique to each of us, and this is because it is an embodied and personal engagement. And this explains why each of us have a different expression of praxis. Our balance is as unique as who we are as persons. As Patricia Benner so clearly demonstrated, nurses undergo a developmental process related to knowledge construction. We ourselves develop alongside our knowledge base. We develop a personal connection to the knowledge. The knowledge that we use becomes relevant to our relationships, to our experiences as we come to develop ourselves in relation. We come to know this world and also ourselves through our frameworks. We locate ourselves in this context. This positionality is generative. We are both stewards of and participants within this environment. And for me, the image of a mirror comes to mind. So to understand our role as knowledge makers, a brief review of our epistemological history is helpful. Nursing education is historically informed by the apprenticeship learning system of the early 1900s. In this time, nurses were taught in hospitals the basic skills of caring. Higher education for nurses was not encouraged. This period in our professional history featured the dominance of empirical knowledge in nursing. And this is not unique to nursing either. As Entrobus notes, such a focus across disciplines was, quote, the result of the demands of capitalism following the Industrial Revolution. Now, this isn't all bad. Empirical knowledge has its solid place, as we've seen. Consider the pitfalls described by Chinn and Kramer as, quote, patterns gone wild. Without scientific competence, we are vulnerable to control and manipulation. However, an overemphasis on empirical knowledge is sometimes connected to what is called the Cartesian split, named for French philosopher René Descartes. It is a division between mind, body, and spirit. This approach may reduce an experience to an objective encounter instead of perhaps a recognition of the fullness of meaning in the context, such as what an aesthetic approach might afford. For better or for worse, it is in this empirically dominant context that most nurses, or many nurses, continue to do their work today. It is in this empirical context, nurses work in a healthcare system increasingly concerned with cost savings. Hiring policies fragment the labor of care workers, employing less educated and lower paid workers to divide the labor of care, and increasingly employ nurses on a casual or part-time basis. Our knowledge is divided. Additionally, although introduced with the intention of raising the standard of care, best practice guidelines and evidence-based practice contribute to this issue. These guidelines present a cookbook approach to nursing knowledge. When a patient falls outside of the rigid pre-described scenarios, they slip through the cracks. Those who fit become an object on an assembly line, to whom we apply our stepwise skills. Again, these guidelines have their place. We need to provide care with a solid evidence base. That is clear. However, the definition of evidence is limited in this view. Empirical knowledge is the most valued. As a result, the wholeness of our knowledge, meaning our clients and ourselves, is reduced to silos and steps. This further undermines both the use and development of all patterns of knowing in nursing. And Reed and Lawrence add that evidence-based practice knowledge is acontextual and prepackaged. It does not seek to develop knowledge, rather access prepackaged knowledge. This paralyzes inquiry. In response, scholars Reed and Lawrence are concerned that practice-based knowledge has been unappreciated and devalued, making nurses' caregiving knowledge, quote, black boxed. They explain, quote, black boxing occurs in nursing when the complexity of behaviors and ideas that come together in nurses' acts of caregiving are invisible, not well understood, nor fully appreciated. But paradoxically, black box knowledge is considered credible and too costly to understand or replace. Caregiving becomes transparent, a taken for granted, yet integral reality in healthcare. Now, ultimately, such perspectives reduce the wholeness of our knowledge and reinforces those epistemological power dynamics where only researchers and academics are granted the status of knowledge generators. In this view, knowledge itself is objectified, transacted only to those with access. From this view, we hear about the so-called theory-practice gap. By shifting our perspective to recognizing that nurses are themselves knowledge makers, we can see that this gap is a myth. Nurses are generating knowledge with implications and contributions to theory every day. I would suggest, rather, that knowledge generated in the practice setting is instead not being heard. It is being locked away in a black box. And at this point, I remind us again of the opening adage, nothing about us without us. So how can nurses change this? Well, Chinn and Kramer offer one option. Quote, as you reflect on your experience, you see meanings that are different from the meanings of learning in existing learning theories. As you discuss your ideas with other nurses, you find that they have made similar observations. From this awareness, you can build a new conceptualization that, once named, can be incorporated into theory and used in practice. Now, I think we have all had that conversation with other nurses, perhaps on a night shift when there may be time to talk at the nursing station. This outcome here may represent an ideal solution, the result of a fluid conversation between nurse knowledge makers in every setting with a shared vision. Could this be the future of nursing knowledge? Now, to imagine the future, I find it helps to look to the past. Author Daniel Pink puts the history of knowledge into 4 eras: agricultural, industrial, informational, and conceptual. And I like to use art to help me understand and appreciate this context a little visually. So I have included some images to help us along. This painting, Haymakers by George Stubbs in 1785, represents a wholesome and manicured view of the agricultural era. Here it is on the English countryside. According to Pink, people in this time period were knowledge workers. They used knowledge to cultivate the land for its resources. Now, for Stubbs' portrayal, even at this time, this painting was seen as idealistic, suggesting that the reality of agriculture was much less polished. This hint at a more difficult reality suggests to me that knowledge in this era, for many, was a means towards survival. Next, Pink identifies the industrial age of factory workers. This era still sees people engaged as knowledge workers. And here I've included a portion of Diego Rivera's 1932 to 1933 mural of workers at the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. He shows workers laboring, almost as if one with the machinery. To me, this portrayal suggests that knowledge was used operationally and functionally towards a finished product in a system which was larger than our individual design. In nursing, the advent of medical technology following World War II exacerbated this epistemological tension. Nurses working with new diagnostic equipment learned about biophysics, physiology, and engineering science. And this focus moved nursing deeper into empirical knowledge. And nurses expressed concern about automation. Here, that concern is portrayed in Nurse as one with machines. Mechanization in nursing can lead to treating people like objects. If nurses viewed patients as objects needing repair, their usefulness would be limited. As nurse scholar Margaret Sandalowski writes, quote, efforts to distinguish between the technical and the theoretical and between handwork and brain work continued to trouble nursing and to deepen the divide among nurses. Ultimately, as Sandalowski goes on to write, quote, objective machine tracings ultimately depended on subjective human readings. Now, this understanding came right before the marker of the information age, the 20th century. This era was characterized by the advent of computing and the internet. Here we are, this was the era of knowledge users, no longer workers. This photo portrays a laboratorian entering influenza information into a CDC database. Here, we used knowledge and technology to help us organize and make strategic decisions. As individuals, it appears that we began to engage more fully than before in the knowledge at hand. Now, Pink proposes that in the 21st century, we are no longer solely knowledge workers or users. Instead, we are entering a new age of knowledge, the conceptual age. Here we are creators and empathizers. We don't work the knowledge, we don't use the knowledge, we make the knowledge. So what might this future of knowledge look like? Well, Pink sketches an outline for us. Here are what Pink describes as the 6 senses of the conceptual age. Recognize that design matters as much as function. Craft a compelling narrative story to make sense of experience. Move beyond specialization and focus towards synthesis. See the big picture, a symphony. Add empathy to logic. Understand and create relationships. Add playfulness, humor, laughter to life, and pursue meaning and spiritual significance. So when you look at these senses, I invite you to consider what patterns of knowledge are evident in these 6 senses. And what creative processes would you use to develop these strengths? And Chinn and Kramer actually outlined some suggestions on page 14 of their 2018 book. So how can we as nurses today engage in knowledge creation? According to Lindsay and Smith, it can be as simple as nurses who critically reflect on their praxis, making connections, seeing patterns, and conceptualizing their practice show how one source of theory is our daily experience. So simple and yet deceptively simple. And here are some ways that nurses theorize every day. Observe by using all ways of knowing. Look for patterns. Make connections. Pose questions. Name possible explanations for observations from a variety of perspectives. Test and revise ideas about what is going on as the situation unfolds. So when we engage in our praxis this way, we are creating theory from our daily experience, as Lindsay and Smith had said. So now I want you to think about it from your own perspective. Think of a situation in your practice where you were called to conduct any of these actions. Observing, using all ways of knowing, looking for patterns, making connections, posing questions, naming explanations, possible explanations for observations from a variety of perspectives, and testing and revising ideas about what was going on as the situation unfolds. I think it's evident that we are already engaged in critical questioning, testing, clarifying, and imagining new possibilities in practice. These actions indicate that we are authenticating and creatively engaging with the knowledge, thus creating new knowledge and connections between existing knowledge. Clearly, we are not simply nurse robots, as illustrated here in Nurse Robot. Many, if not all of us, are already theorizing and generating knowledge. And this signifies a shift from a user mentality to a creator's, a praxis that is alive and based in inquiry. And I just love that image. It says it all. So to move towards a more inquiry-based praxis, what can nurses do? Well, make your knowledge visible in all its wholeness. More than ever, nurses' knowledge matters. Here are some prompts that nurse scholars Don and Varco offer to promote a more present, engaged, inquiry-based praxis. You can ask yourself, what kind of nurse do I want to be in this situation? What kind of knowledge is evident through many ways of knowing? And how might theory and evidence enlarge the possibilities for being with this particular patient in this specific situation? And then with that last question, theory and evidence are not being used to prescribe how I should be, but they're being used to enlarge the possibilities for being. And we notice how that's different. Now, such an approach represents an opportunity for a renewed way of being in praxis. Reed and Lawrence propose the role of a clinical scholar, advising practitioners to, quote, link empirical to the theoretical, to explain events, and help patients recognize patterns and meanings in what they are experiencing so they can participate more fully in their own health. The clinical scholar regards knowledge as a process, not a product. It's clear here that empirical knowledge from machinery or otherwise, that is only one pattern of knowing. So now I'd like to invite you to consider, how do you imagine the role of a clinical scholar could be integrated into your current practice setting? What would be some challenges and what would be some opportunities? I would invite you here to pause the video maybe and maybe write a few sentences just about what that might look like in your practice setting or your area of background. And that reflection could be useful for papers and other reflections coming down the road. So I'd also like you to consider, how do I currently make my nursing knowledge visible? And how might I share my knowledge with others in order to contribute to established connections, either in theory or otherwise? Ultimately, these reflections are to support us with the idea of being clinically expert. And this is described by Rawnsley as paradoxical creative thinking tempered by tolerance for ambiguity is essential in nursing science practice. And it distinguishes the clinical expert in nursing science from the rigid and rule-bound procedural technician in nursing. From this quote, I particularly draw on the concepts of control and ambiguity. And to sort of close our time together, I'd like to invite you to engage in a contemplative activity with me to explore these concepts. And this sort of centers around the question, how would you describe your relationship with ambiguity? And how would you describe your relationship with control? And how might this influence your ability to become a clinical scholar? So, to engage in this activity, I would like to invite you to do so. It is completely optional and up to your comfort. Since we're not able to do this live together, I can't monitor if you're experiencing discomfort with it. So I do invite you to take care. If this is feeling at all uncomfortable for you, simply open your eyes and come back to the present moment. And if you feel distressed from the experience that you've had, please do seek out support through the university. You can contact Dr. Fredericks, or you can also email myself, and I can connect you with that if necessary. Just please do take care and know that this is completely optional. Okay, having said that, please find a comfortable position in your seat. Find your feet on the floor and notice your breath. Notice your spine erect, but also loose. Your hands can be placed comfortably in your lap. Your breath wherever it may be, with your feet on the floor. I invite you to soften your gaze or close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you. And notice your breath. Feel the chair underneath you. Notice your breath. Feel your feet on the ground and notice your breath. In and out. In and out. In and out. Now, in this space of calm, introduce the word control into your mind. Feel the contours of the letters in your mouth. Where do you feel this word in your body? What is your body's response to this word? Is there a story that your body is telling you? Be gentle with yourself and just notice these sensations. Return your attention to your breath. And now try to direct your breath to the location of these sensations. Allow the cool inhale to reach the word. And on the exhale, feel the story being released. Return to your breath. To the chair underneath you. To your feet on the floor. Notice your breath. Now try the word ambiguity. What shape does this word take? Where does it appear in your body? Are you sensing any shifts in sensation? Don't try to force anything. Just try to observe with a gentle curiosity. Notice any messages from your body. What is different about this word? What stories are being told here? How does it feel to sit with ambiguity? Notice your breath. Allow the cool inhale to reach the word, and on the exhale, feel the story being released. Chair underneath you. Feet on the ground. Notice your breath. In and out. In and out. In and out. You may want to stay here a while and enjoy the sense of grounding. When you're ready, gently open your eyes or refocus your gaze on the room around you. Thank you. Welcome back. Together, let's take a moment to journal about that experience. How did you experience control? How did you experience ambiguity? What sensations were you experiencing in your body and where? How do you make sense of these sensations? Were there stories being told? If so, perhaps note these stories in bullet points in your journal and feel free to explore them more on your own time. So I invite you here to pause the video to your comfort, to your convenience, and just to make some notes of that for your own learning and your own development. Thank you. So here at this point, we review our learner-centered outcomes and what we had hoped and what I had planned for today. So by the end of this session, I hope you should now be able to, first of all, appreciate how nurses are knowledge makers as well as knowledge users. Second of all, I hope that you will be able to understand how a process of inquiry into nursing praxis actually reveals the construction of nursing knowledge. And finally, I hope that through this mindful activity, you've been able to imagine and think about and visualize adopting the role of clinical scholar in nursing praxis development and to be able to take that forward. Finally, I would just like to thank you all so much for allowing me to share this time with you. Leave it up for a second so you can see my email there. Please feel free to email me if you have feedback or questions or comments or anything. I'm available to you for that. And I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to this class, for this experience, Dr. Fredericks. And I hope to be able to meet with some of the students at some point, if it's over email or otherwise. And I really wish you all the best as you continue on with this course. I know this course is definitely one of the most powerful ones that this program offers. And for me, it really helped transform my thinking. So I wish you all the best on your own journeys as you go through this course. And Dr. Fredericks, I pass the floor back to you. So thank you all so much. Take care.